All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out to Community Board 4's Deed Fraud webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to educate community members on deed fraud. For those of us who don't know, deed theft is when someone illegally obtains real estate, often to sell it at a huge profit in high demand housing markets like Brooklyn. This event will educate Bushwick homeowners about the prevalence of deed fraud in Brooklyn and steps that we should take to protect our property. Our speaker today is Shaina Jones Esquire, and Shaina will speak on what deed fraud is, how to prevent becoming a deed fraud victim, and what to do if you've been a victim of deed fraud. So Shaina, feel free to take it over.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shaina Jones McGrone. I know you all may notice that I am off camera today, so please forgive me. I am really under the weather. And I would rather be here with you off camera than be on camera so you can see my nose running and me dabbing it and all sorts of other things that happen when you get a cold. So I am happy to be joining you here today to talk to you about deed fraud, something that is of great concern to homeowners in Brooklyn and Black and Brown communities throughout New York City. I want to really give you some in-depth information, some practical, some actual true stories, and some ways that you can protect yourselves and your families and really put into the context of what deed fraud really means to our communities. So I'm going to pull up some slides and I'm going to go through these. And I know that Josh is going to have a presentation after me. I was not going to be on for the whole day today, but because I am sick, I had to cancel all of my other appointments. So I will be here to support Community Board 4 for the entirety of this presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions when the time comes. So I am just going to share my screen, and we are going to get started. So as you already know, I'm going to be talking to you today about deed fraud, and we're going to talk about what it is and how to protect yourself. First, I want to give you a little information about me so that you know who you're talking to. So as Josh already told you, my name is Shaina Jones McGrone, and I'm a native Brooklynite, a native of East New York, Brooklyn. I've been an attorney for 14 years. And I am currently the owner and managing attorney of Artisan Law. I specialize in estate planning, in helping families and business owners to transfer the wealth that they've created to the next generations and or to any other heirs that they may have. I'm going to give you just a little bit, more background about me because I think it's always helpful to know who you're talking to. So I told you I'm a native New Yorker, and I've been an attorney for 14 years. And I actually started my career doing something that I wanted to do in law school and that I love to do. I was a public defender. I was actually a public defender in Philadelphia for about 4 years. I went to law school in Philly, Temple Law School, and I worked for the Defender Association of Philadelphia during that time. And during that time, helped to defend indigent individuals accused of crimes. So those who could not pay for anything from misdemeanors up to major felonies. It was the work that I wanted to do. I loved doing that work. And after my time in Philadelphia, I transferred to the Bronx Defenders for a time. After that, I really decided that I needed to switch gears for my career for a variety of reasons. One of the main ones was that I really did not feel that my desire to use the law as a tool to help individuals was really served by my being a public defender. I kind of felt like I was a cog in the wheel of helping people go to jail because you couldn't send my clients to jail unless I was standing there. But if I was, you could, right? And I really decided that I thought that part of the fight to move Black and Brown people forward, to change our collective stance was really about wealth creation, because money does talk in a lot of ways. And so I moved my career over to first engaging in business transactional work. I did some business litigation, but business transactional work, helping people to start businesses. I also work in the area of intellectual property. I hold a Master of Law degree in intellectual property from Cardozo Law School in Manhattan. So helping business owners to create their businesses and protect their brands. And then as I continued on, I really came to understand that it's also about the transference of your wealth to the next generation. So I sought and obtained additional extensive legal training on estate planning. And that is how I help people to transfer their wealth. So my firm really works on two sides, the estate planning side as well as business planning side. And really my mission this year is to make sure that my communities know as much as possible about estate planning, how amazing it can be for your families and why you want to do it. And I'm happy to be here with you today to talk about deed fraud, because deed fraud does impact our legacy, does impact our generational wealth, and obviously it impacts our communities while we're still here. So I like to start out with a couple of illustrative stories for you, because I think stories always tend to bring the situation home. It really helps you to understand that when we're talking about these things, we're really talking about people that we may know. So I'm going to give you two real life stories, and I've also provided for you the place that I've got these stories from so that you can go and research yourself. So the first story that I'm going to tell you about is the Hambricks. So the Hambricks were actually a father and daughter duo out of Harlem. And I'm sure you all realize that Harlem has faced or is facing some of the same issues that many of our communities are in Brooklyn. So this comes out of Harlem. And this family, and I'm sorry, it's a son and a daughter, son and a mother duo. So this family owned this brownstone for about 3 generations. And over the course of time, some weird things started happening to them. Police would come to the door of the family members saying that they were responding to a 911 call that a home invasion was happening. They would start to get weird mail about their property. And eventually they had individuals coming to their door, effectively trying to kick them out of their property. They didn't know what was going on because they had never engaged in the sale of a property. But as you're hearing from me, escalating behavior kept happening. And so eventually they contacted an attorney, and they came to find out that someone had filed a false deed on their property. The property had effectively been transferred from their name to another individual, and they were no longer the owners and subject to being evicted from a home that their family had owned for 3 generations. At the time when this happened in 2014, this was a brownstone worth $1.5 million. Imagine what it's worth today. And so the Hambricks, over the course of several years, they engaged in a fight for the return of their fraudulently conveyed property to their ownership. And so what we know about the actual transfer is that the individuals who were engaging in this fraudulent behavior tried several times in order to steal the home from this family. Several different times they filed phony deeds with the finance department, and those deeds were rejected several times, but they kept trying, and eventually they landed on the right filing that the finance department accepted. And then they were allowed to do things like call the police and say that the Hambricks were illegally living in their home. They were able to finally get them tossed out by other individuals. And then the Hambricks had to go through a series of costly and years-long fight in order to undo the fraudulent conveyance of their home. So that's one story out of Harlem. And of course, you can see that this comes from DNAinfo.com. This was also originally a New York Times article, but sometimes New York Times can decide that they want to charge you for the articles. DNA Info has the copy for free, right? So you can get it. That's the title, and that is those are the authors. So now I want to talk with you about the biases. So the biases are actually a family out in Brooklyn. They lived in Crown Heights. And here's what we know about their story. So the biases at the time were facing some difficulty paying the bills for their home, mortgage, property taxes, other bills. And they had someone approach them with what seemed to be really too good to be true scenario. It was an attempt to refinance the property with a very, very large payout. It was an attempt to finance the property with a very, very large payout. And because the homeowners were facing some difficulty with paying, they decided to take up this offer. They signed some documents that they thought were refinance documents, but these individuals, these really scammers, that's really the appropriate name for them, stuck in some paperwork that was actually the conveyance of their property to them. The family never received, of course, the refinance, the payout money that they were expecting to receive. And they also had to engage in a battle to recover their lost property. All right, so these are just a couple of illustrative stories. You see that the second one by the biases, you can find that at nylag.org. And this is a more recent example from 2018. But please don't think that these examples are few and far between. Don't think that that you can't find them everywhere. These go on every day, and it's been happening for years. So I'm going to get back into a little bit more of the history of deed fraud and how prevalent it is in New York as of the past 10 to 15 years. But let me first define what deed fraud is for you. Those stories gave you some illustrations, and I'm going to come back to them, but I want to give you some actual definitions. So deed fraud can also be known as title theft. And deed fraud or deed theft occurs when a scammer takes title to someone's home without the owner's knowledge, or when a scammer obtains title by misleading or coercing an unsuspecting homeowner. And after taking title to that property, the scammer will sell the property and pocket the proceeds. They'll often engage in this fraudulent behavior by using false names and or front companies, often front LLCs. So LLCs that aren't, they are actually filed with the state, but they're companies filed specifically to engage in fraudulent behavior. And the owners are not necessarily the people who are on the articles of organization filed with the state. They're often fraudulent individuals. So there are generally three main types or three main models that you'll find with deed fraud. And the stories that I had for the handbricks and the biases illustrate those. So let's start with the first one. So you've got the refinance model. So in that model, you'll have a scammer target a homeowner, generally someone who's elderly, and that person may be having issues making their mortgage payments or paying their property taxes or their water bill. And I'm sure anyone who's a homeowner here knows that failure to pay any of those payments can be a way in which a lien or a foreclosure can start against your property. So they'll target that homeowner that's having problems making the payments, and they'll often offer to refinance the property, often in a way that seems too good to be true, with a significant large payout, a ridiculous type of insurance payment. And often, they'll be able to take advantage of a homeowner because the homeowner is, lacking the knowledge. If they're lacking the knowledge. If they're elderly, they may not be consulting with any trusted family members, and they're often having just paper shoved in front of them that they are just signing. And in the midst of that paperwork, it will often contain deed paperwork signing away the title to their property under the premise of the refinance. So from the two examples that I gave you, the biases example was an example of that refinance model. So here's another model. It's the absentee landlord model. And in this example, scammers, and when I say scammers, we're talking about, individuals who are thieves, but also understand when I say scammers, I'm talking about, unscrupulous property buyers too, right? So these are not necessarily just unsophisticated people off the street. These are people who are going into this knowing what real estate means, knowing what they're doing, and they're using it for their own benefit and selling it to others later, right? So in the absentee landlord model, you have scammers who will troll property records, meaning they will go and search through property records, or they'll search through surrogates court records, which are records addressing those who are going through the probate process, right? People who have died and who either have no will or have a will. They're going through those records and they're searching for properties where the owner of the property is either an absentee landlord, meaning they're not inhabiting the property, they don't have tenants inhabiting the property is vacant, or the homeowner is dead and there are no known heirs. And then based upon that information, they'll file a phony deed with the finance department, having the property transferred to them or transferred to their shell company or whatever other front name that they're using. Okay. And then you may have the identity theft model. So in the identity theft model, scammers will actually steal the homeowner's identity through missing or discarded utility bills or other discarded identifying information. And then they'll open a HELOC, so a home equity line of credit, or some other form of mortgage property. And then they won't make the payments, and that will lead to a foreclosure. Of course, all the while, the actual property owner is actually living in the home, and they may not actually be receiving any notice of these mortgage products or failure to pay, because oftentimes the bills will be sent to another address as dictated by the scammer. So in the handbricks model, you kind of have a combination. We saw a little bit of identity theft in that one. And you also had you still had living relatives, but you had generations of individuals, and there was also some indication that some records had not been kept up with. So I want to give you some shocking statistics to bring it home even more. So between 2014 and 2020, the New York City Finance Department has received over 3,000 cases of deed fraud. And approximately 45% of those cases, almost 1,500 of those cases, are from Brooklyn residents. Deed fraud scammers overwhelmingly target Black and Brown residents in gentrifying neighborhoods. So let's talk about, and for those of you who really know the history of America and Black history of America, that deed theft or stealing property from Black people has been something that has been prevalent in this country since its inception, whether you're talking about real estate or other forms of property, right? Whether you're talking about New York City or in the South. But I want to talk to you specifically about what this current resurgence of deed property stems out of. A lot of it stems out of the 2008 crash, the 2008 mortgage crash, where you had those balloon mortgages. You had homeowners that didn't have jobs, individuals reeling from the financial crisis, who could not make payments on their home, who could not meet their mortgage payments and other obligations of being a homeowner. And they were largely Black and Brown people. They couldn't get refinancing from various banks, and they were then targeted by unscrupulous individuals in order to oust them from their homes and take those homes and have them conveyed to other demographics, right? And that housing crisis or The dominoes from that housing crisis have really continued up to this day, right? A lot of gentrification in our neighborhood stems from that housing crisis. And it also stems from planned neighborhood changes, right? But that's another topic for another day. So what are some of the consequences, the real consequences of deed fraud? So of course you have the illegal loss of property, which functionally means for many people eviction, right? It means functionally being kicked out of your home and potentially not having any place to go. And we're talking about elderly people being kicked out of their homes and having no place to go. It also means the theft and the loss of generational wealth. Our homes are worth a lot of money. They're now often worth 2, 3, sometimes $4 or $5 million, right? That's generational wealth. That's wealth that gets passed on and helps your children and your heirs start off at a different place of life. And so it is really the collective robbing of the forward movement of communities. That's what deed fraud means. It also means costly and time-consuming legal action. Now, for some members of the community who have been victims, they're fortunate enough to catch it in time or understand that something is going on, and they're able to seek legal help and redress. But that still comes with the payment of money to attorneys. It's also a time-consuming battle, and your property is still in limbo while these cases of fraud are addressed and hopefully unraveled. So what to do if you're a victim? You're certainly going to want to contact an attorney because this is a case of fraud. And you're going to want to investigate all methods of legal redress. You are also going to want to file a complaint using the dedicated complaint process instituted by our Attorney General, Letitia James, under the Protect Our Homes initiative, which was started in 2020. I've included the contact information for that initiative on this slide. You can contact by phone, by email, or there is a dedicated online complaint form at the AG's office website. You want to put that complaint in not only because it is a way of redress and unraveling the process, but also because it provides statistics for the AG's office for further action. It also puts scammers on record because at some point when you address these claims, there has to be the investigation process is going to include looking at the names of these individuals, tracing where they may be on various deeds, tracing who these shell or what and who these shell companies are and who they may trace back to so that you can find the real culprits. It's about creating a paper trail and eventually getting to the sources of these scams. Now I want to talk with you about some practical tips in order to protect yourself. I am a firm believer in the saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I want to talk with you about some ways that you can prevent you or your family members or your neighbors and friends from becoming victims of deed fraud. So first, you're going to want to keep regular tabs on the status of your deed. Check your property deed at least once per year. If you're not familiar with ACRIS, and I know Josh is going to talk with you about this in more depth, ACRIS is a free city website where you can search property records, including your own. It's free to look up those records and even print a copy as long as you don't need a certified copy. And that services Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, and Manhattan. So, Kings, Queens, Bronx County, and New York County. If you're in Richmond County or Staten Island, you have to actually go to the clerk's office. There's actually a city program where you can receive notice of any new documents recording against your property. So you're going to want to sign up for the Notice of Recorded Deed program. The city register will automatically mail you when a new document is recorded against your deed. You're going to want to check your deed and make sure that your deed details are correct, right? Make sure that your name is spelled correctly. Make sure that all details are correct so that there's no ability to say that this is not actually yours. And if there are issues with your deed, you're going to want to file the appropriate paperwork to update the deed. You need to contact the Department of Finance if you stop receiving property tax bills, or the Department of Environmental Protection if you stop receiving water bills. Now, I know you may be saying to yourself, wow, what a boon. No property tax bill, no water bill. Hooray for me. It is not hooray for you. You are not ever going to get out of paying your property tax or your water bills. So if you are not getting those bills, if they are not being paid, there is a problem. You need to figure out why you are not getting them. You need to make sure that they are up to date and being paid. Other practical tips. Shred your old bills and records before discarding them with a hex shredder, right? Fishing, right? Or dumpster diving, actually going through someone's bills to obtain personal information is still a thing. Don't put out your personal information into your trash without shredding them. A hex shredder is a shredder that's going to chop it up into those little pieces and not just a straight line shredder that can be pieced back together. You want a hex shredder. And if you don't have a hex shredder, there are plenty of places across the city that will take your documents and shred them securely for you. UPS stores, FedEx stores. There are even companies that will come to your home and pick up your old bills and records and shred them. Now let's talk about if your property is vacant. If your property is vacant, check it often. And if you're not in town to check it often, or if you're unable to do it because you're elderly, have someone trusted check it for you and give you regular updates. And really also, if you can, another practical thing is install a Ring camera or some other form of online cloud-based monitoring software. I'm sure those of you who use Ring cameras, or if you don't know, the Ring camera comes with an amazing app where you can check what's going on in your property at any time of the day. Those Ring doorbells and those Ring cameras are amazing. By title insurance, so that there is a cloud on your deed, a cloud on your property, an issue with the title, that you have some form of redress, that you have some form of way of recouping some money. The other thing, particularly for those who are elderly, but not only for those who are elderly, when you are dealing with legal documents, they can be really difficult because they often are written in a different language. So discuss with a trusted family member, or even still consult with an attorney before making those decisions that can affect your property, such as adding or removing someone from your deed, or taking out a new mortgage property, including a new mortgage, a second mortgage, a reverse mortgage, or a HELOC, otherwise known as a home equity line of credit. Also, create a proper estate plan for yourself that plans for the transfer of property to the next generation or other heirs. Don't let your property just sit out there with no one to claim it upon your passing. Don't leave it up to the courts to institute the state's plan for you if you don't put a plan in place. Take charge of what's going on in your life and the life of your families and create a proper estate plan. And then for those who do inherit property, update the deed with the proper name, the new name of the new owners, and any additional contact information. So that's all that I have for you. I hope that this has given you some real practical information about deed fraud, about how to protect yourself. And I'm going to turn it over to Josh now for his part of the program. I'm happy to answer any questions when the time comes.
All right, thank you so much, Shaina. I guess we'll open it up to Q&A. If you have any questions, you could just chime in now or,
This is Annette.
Yeah.
I have one question. The acronym HELOC stands for what?
stands for
It
home.
stands for Home Equity Line of Credit.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Tawana. My question is for Shaina. I was just wondering, why do you think that there are 45% cases of deed theft in Brooklyn?
Because Brooklyn is the new Manhattan.
Mhm.
Because you can get amazing properties in Brooklyn in ways that you can't get them in Manhattan. The brownstones in Brooklyn are amazing. You can't get brownstones like that up in Manhattan for anywhere near what you can get them for in Brooklyn, even with the prices of what they are now in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is the new Manhattan. It is gentrified at an amazing rate. I'm sure you can see it when you walk down the street. That's why
Okay.
Brooklyn is the target.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if could you put hi, it's Camacho. I'm the chair of CB4. Thank you for this presentation, man. I appreciate and the board appreciates you and Joshua bringing information is key. Is there any way that or you can add in your deed specs or anything that you want your deed to say if you don't want in regards to inheriting or your family members, or how in regards for them and not us, our Bushwick is R6, in regards to keeping it a 2, where you might have one of your kids that are little cuckoo bird and want to sell it to developer so they can go up with it, where you can request that it stays the way it is. Is there any way that you can get an attorney to amend your deed in regards to some of the restrictions in the home, or it would have to be a zoning change?
So I think you're asking two different questions, and I'm gonna state what I think you're asking first. So I think you're asking first, is there a way to change the deed so that heirs are already addressed? Is that a first part of the question? And
Yes,
it's the second. Okay, all right.
yes, that's one. And two, to in the deed to say that it should stay a 2-family home and not
Sure.
demolish it to do a 100-unit non-affordable.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm going to say personally, I cannot speak to zoning laws. I do not know that you can actually do that with a deed. I do think that that is actually something that comes down to, zoning by zoning boards in the city. And if someone knows different, I'm happy to hear from you, but I do not know that specifically. So let's talk about deeds though. So there are various types of deeds that can be implemented for a property. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I am going to say this, that there are various ways to convey a property, and there are some ways to convey a deed during the course of your lifetime, and they have various benefits and or detractors. So one of the ways that clients will do that, right, will convey a property during the course of their lifetime with to heirs, is by using a deed that has a life estate with remainderment. Okay, and what that means functionally is that the original homeowner, let's say it's your mom, says that I want to be able to live in this property for the course of my life. But then after my life, I want that property to go to my child or my children immediately thereafter. Okay. So the mom has the life estate, the child or the children are the remainderment. So that does a couple of things. It does a couple of things functionally. First, it's going to be a way to already convey the property during the course of your lifetime, but keeping the option to live in it, right? For the original homeowner, for the mom. It conveys the property to the child, so they already have an interest. It also, though, functionally curtails some of the original rights that the mom would have in the property, such as being able to sell the property, take out loan products, do other things, right? Because she's transferred an interest to the children. It's a way to avoid probate. Okay. And it may be a way that you want to avoid probate, it may not be, because this is what it also functionally does. This is why I often don't recommend this method of conveyance to people who want to do this in lieu of estate planning in a trust-based or a will-based method. One of the issues with a life estate deed with the remainderment is that because your children are now already homeowners during the course of your life, the property becomes subject to any lawsuits, creditors, judgments, divorces of your children. So let's say, for example, your child is in some form of an accident, or is the cause of some form of an injury, and there's a lawsuit against that child. Your property can now be used to satisfy a judgment of child because they have that remainderment interest. Whereas before, it wouldn't have been able to happen. And if you conveyed it in another method of estate planning, such as trust estate planning, there are certain things that you can do to kind of prevent those consequences as well. All right. It also affects the step up in basis. Okay. So step up in basis addresses the credit that a homeowner or someone who has conveyed a property will receive if they then later want to sell the property. So for example, if you have a life estate deed with a remainderment and the transfer happens this year, the basis that the child receives it for, or the amount that the child receives it for, the value of the property is going to be the value of the property at the time the deed was created. If the child then goes to sell the property, let's say 15, 20 years later, they're going to have a tax problem with the change in value from the time the deed was created to the time that they go to sell it. Whereas if they only were conveyed the deed or the property later, actually that 15, 20 years later, they receive the credit at the time that the property is actually paid, purchased then, which is going to be, if any, a lower value that taxes are assessed against, right? That property taxes or transfer taxes are assessed against. So life estate with remainderment is one way to do it, right? That is one way to actually put heirs on a property. And it's not my preferred way. Perhaps it will slow a scammer down, but that also means that, other individuals, should be keeping track of what's going on with the deed as well. I hope that answered your question.
I guess one thing I'll ask Shanna is, just as an estate planning professional, how does proper estate planning prevent the issue of deed fraud upon someone's death or upon divorce or any life event? And we also have Barbara Smith who has a question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, going back to the presentation, one of the ways that deed fraud can happen is because scammers will go and they will look at surrogate courts and property records for parcels or real estate that don't have heirs named, or they have absentee landlords, right? So it belongs to someone, but maybe it's not immediately evident who the property belongs to, or there has to be a search for who the property belongs to. And so because there hasn't been any plan in place, that the original owner didn't name any heirs, you leave that property open to being an easy target for someone to scoop it up, because they figure there's no one who's going to immediately come forward to protest this sale or have knowledge that a sale has even occurred, right? It's just that there's no one there to receive any information about it, because no one is clear to whom it belongs to. So the reason that estate planning becomes very helpful in preventing deed fraud is that it puts scammers and courts on notice as to who the property is supposed to be conveyed to. It's much less tempting to attempt to steal a property from someone when you know someone is named and supposed to own this property versus when you don't see anyone, right? Because you assume that at some point, someone is going to be looking at what's going on. So that's how estate planning helps. One
Barbara
of the ways.
Smith? Thank you.
Hello,
Hi, Barbara,
Yes.
we can hear you.
you hear me? I wanted to know, as a proxy, when you put someone down as a proxy for medical and finances, does that go on like a mortgage and a deed in your house too? If something happens to you if you're in the hospital and not able to take care of any personal business?
So that's a great question, Barbara. So no, so let's talk about first. Let me just define first what you're talking about. So when you say proxy, you're really talking about agents, okay? Or fiduciary. And in this particular instance, you're talking about a financial power of attorney.
Right.
A financial power of attorney is going to provide an agent that you choose the right to exercise certain financial activities and rights on your behalf if you're incapacitated. In New York, there are a set of about 15 to 20 enumerated rights that you can give to your financial power of attorney. You can give them one, some, or all of them in the event of your incapacity. And one of those rights does include addressing your real estate. So the name will not go on the deed, but that individual is able to address those matters if you're incapacitated. So what does that functionally mean? What might you functionally want to do? If someone knows, or if you are someone's agent, or if it's becoming clear that someone is descending into a manner of incapacity, for example, perhaps Alzheimer's or something like that, maybe you want to contact the mortgage company in order to let them know, or you should contact the mortgage company in order to let them know that the agent is going to be handling certain things, right? So that it's very clear that there's someone else that's supposed to be in charge, or someone else that's supposed to be contacted in case, in the event of your incapacity, so that someone is aware. So no, someone's name won't be put on the deed, but at least there's going to be a cognizant person, an aware person who's supposed to be keeping vigilant of things that are happening in your financial life if you're the incapacitated person.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, my lawyer told me about that. He was like, he tried to recommend that to a lot of seniors. So after he recommended that, I said, yeah, that could be true for seniors. They could get sick and be in the hospital, and somebody try to do something with their property and they don't know, so.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to think about it, for seniors, one of those ways in which a property can become vacant for a senior is if they go into some form of nursing home or assisted living care. Yeah. It's not as if they don't intend to come back to their home, but at that point in time, they're not able to come back to their home. Yeah. And so there are two like really, I think I won't call them shocking, I'm going to call them eye-opening. One of the statistics, and these are both from AARP, is that 70% of people over 65 are going to need some form of assisted living or nursing home care at 65 plus. The other statistic is that 80% of people 80 and over will need some form of nursing home or assisted living. And for both of those, I'm also talking about in-home care, but really we're talking about being out of the home for this purpose, but some form of assisted living care, nursing home care over the course of their life, which means that their home could be vacant for weeks or years, leaving them susceptible to this kind of behavior. And let me also add, one of those practical tips that didn't make it onto the slide is if you are not in your home, either you're just not occupying it, it's not being rented out at the time, whatever it is, don't let your mail pile up there. Either go to the post office and have your mail be held so that it can be picked up at the post office at a later point in time. Have your mail forwarded temporarily to the location that you're going to be at, or have a trusted friend or relative collect your mail. I mean, there's nothing, like a beacon that you're not home than having mail piling up in your mailbox or in front of your property to let people know you're not there. And whether it's going to be deed fraud or just someone breaking into your home because they know you're not home, it's a problem. It's a beacon, and it's an easy thing to not let yourself, it's an easy thing to do to not allow yourself to be a victim.
Thank you.
You're
I have
welcome.
one other question. This is Annette again. What happens when you have a situation with a squatter that decides to move into a vacant home because the owner is not around?
So tell me a little bit more what you mean, Annette. I mean, what it means is that they're sitting in your home and they shouldn't be there.
The house is vacant.
Right,
The owner is not around,
right.
and these people come and they move in and set up a house.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean by squatter, but I'm saying, are you asking how to get them out? Are you asking, what are you asking? Tell me what you're asking.
What is the right of the homeowner? Because according to some of the squatters, they say if they're in there for more than 30 days, that you can't get them out.
Yeah,
unless you
so
pay
I
them.
so I am not a landlord and tenant attorney, but what I can tell you is that just like with any individual who comes into your home and is there for a certain period of time, they can attain tenants' rights. And you
Yeah.
can and do have to go through formal eviction in order to get them out.
Yeah.
There's also a thing called adverse possession, where an individual in your home for a significant and continuous period of time, often years, can often obtain actual ownership rights in the property. So that's one of the reasons why you want to keep accurate tabs on your home and know what is going on, whether you're living there or not, so that you prevent that issue. Because yes, once they are in for a certain period of time, it can be very difficult to get them out. One of the beautiful things about New York, and this thing cuts both ways, is that New York is a tenant-friendly state. New York City is certainly a tenant-friendly city. So it can be difficult to evict a tenant, right? Which is an amazing thing, because you don't want people just being kicked out onto the streets because there is a dispute. But the flip side of the coin is that once a person is there and they've been there for a certain period of time, if they really shouldn't be there because they're not paying you and they should be, you really might have a hard time getting them out. So you really want to take charge and keep charge of your home. It's really your responsibility of being a homeowner. It's a right and a responsibility of home ownership to keep up with your property and know what's going on with it, and taking the proper steps to keep it in good stead.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. Shannon, I know we spoke about the whole nursing home and the retirement home issue. In Bushwick, that's been an issue we've been facing with homeowners, to where you have a child and their grandmother gets them very sick. She needs long-term care, and somehow the retirement home is able to take the property from them. It's not necessarily deed and fraud, but because they didn't have proper precautions with Medicare look back and things of that nature, we see a lot of retirement homes taking $1 million properties. So could you just speak on the steps we can do to prevent that? Because I've seen that just as a real estate professional over and over, to where the retirement home is the entity taking people's properties.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point, Josh. And that leads into some real significant and interesting issues for all of us. So let's go back to those statistics I talked with you about, right? 70% of people over 65 needing some form of assisted living or nursing home care over the course of the rest of their life, or 80% of people needing some form of assisted living or nursing home care over the course of their life. So let's talk about what happens. Let's talk about the cost of nursing home or in-home care, and let's talk about how that gets paid for. So in New York, the average fee for a nursing home on a monthly basis can be anywhere from $15,000 to about $20,000 monthly, okay? If you are having an assisted living, it's about a couple $1,000s less on either end. And in-home care is somewhere between 10 to 15,000. So how's that going to get paid for, right? Because who has $15,000 to $20,000 per month to go to nursing home care? Not most people. So how does that get paid for? It gets paid for out of one of three pots. It's either going to come out of your actual pocket, it's going to come from long-term care insurance, or it's going to come from Medicaid. Okay. Um, with or ICE and specifically ICP Medicaid, which deals. Sorry, just give me one. I, like all of you, am home and have loud family members. Okay, so ICP Medicaid, which specifically addresses or is the program that is funded as a federal state partnership for addressing those seniors who need in-home or assisted living or Medicaid, or nursing home care, and subsidizing that care. So of course, the first responsibility is going to be on the actual client or the person who needs that care to pay for it. And if you cannot pay for it, if you can't pay for it out of pocket, if you don't have long-term care insurance in order to pay for it or subsidize it, then you're going to want to become eligible for Medicaid. And becoming eligible for Medicaid, really, you have to be at below poverty levels in order to qualify for it. You can only have $934. I believe that's the exact number of income on a monthly basis, and about $16,800 in assets to qualify for Medicaid. So you really have to be below poverty in order to qualify for it. All right. And so if you do end up, and there are certain exemptions, right? Your actual primary home can be an exempted property. There's a little bit more to go into for that, but for now, we'll just leave it at that. But once you pass away, let's say you do have Medicaid, there's an estate recovery plan for Medicaid, which means the state is going to go after your assets in order to receive a payback for the money that they put out in order to make sure that you were taken care of over the course of your life. They're going to want their money back. The state and the federal government and or the nursing home wants their money back for that care that you received. And so oftentimes the way that bill is covered is through the sale of your home. Or if during your lifetime, if you haven't figured out a way to qualify for Medicaid, you're paying for that through the sale of your home. And so even when you do Medicaid planning, there are various ways to do Medicaid planning that allow you to qualify. But there are some tools that are better than others that allow you to qualify, but also maintain generational wealth, maintain those family properties. So that is why if you are in need of Medicaid, or if you are thinking about what your care may be when you go to or become at or after retirement age, you really want to sit down and talk with a qualified attorney that specializes in elder care, special needs planning to address proper Medicaid planning.
All right, thank you. And just to clarify, the home gets sold because of the overdue costs that the person needing long-term care is receiving. So
That's
they
right.
get forced to sell the property.
That's right.
Good. Thank you. All right. Do we have any other questions? Pretty good. All right, so I'll leave it with that. Shaina, thank you so much for the information today. Just to recap, we encourage everyone on our on board, as well as to tell your friends and family. You can sign up for ACRIS free. That's the Automated City Registrar Information System. And what ACRIS does is it gives you a free notification anytime a deed is changed on your property, anytime there's a new mortgage brought up, or anytime there's any type of legal activity going on with your house. Once again, that's ACRIS, which is the acronym, which is the Automated City Register Information System. With that, you'll have the tools, one, to be informed as if something happens, so that you can then take the actions that Shaina spoke about regarding contacting an attorney as well as the county sheriff, which is recommended in as per the Attorney General. Yeah, so if there aren't any more questions, Shaina, I know your information is in the chat. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. It was definitely education that will empower us, that we can take out and tell them others. We hope to put this on our YouTube channel, and I thank everybody for coming out today. I see somebody's taking Shaina's info. I'll let you do that. All right. All right.
Thank you, Josh, for everything. God bless you guys. Thank you for all the info. It was real nice to hear from you on a Saturday afternoon.
Good. I'm encouraged just by the estate planning as well as this and workshop. I'm glad we're taking action steps to empower our.
Very good, Josh.
Good. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
Once
Shaina,
again, Josh, thank you, dear.
thank you.
It was informative.
Good. And to our host, Shaina, thank you so much. And we look forward to many more webinars with you in the future.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Always a pleasure to be with you guys.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Have a safe
Thank
weekend.
you.
Thank
great
you.
day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Josh.
Bye-bye.
Bye.